Much, and now let's go across live to a briefing given by the Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, on GST.
Which was on the calculation of the annual increase in revenue, which is a formulation which is required for determining the compensation payable to any state losing out on revenue. That was not to be taken up today, and it will be taken up in the next meeting of the Council, which will be held for 3 consecutive days. The dates have been slightly altered because of the convenience of some members. The original dates were 17th, 18th and 19th October. The dates now will be 18th, 19th and 20th of October. So it's been just pushed by 1 day. One of the, obviously the first item has to be the approval of the minutes of the last meeting. With regard to one item recorded in the minutes, with regard to the service tax assessments in the new dispensation, there was a long discussion on the interpretation of the decision taken in the last meeting, and that discussion consumed quite a lot of the timing today. That discussion was inconclusive, and therefore it will continue in the next meeting on the 18th. On the regular items of agenda, there were 2 items on the agenda. One was with regard to the draft GST rules. Now these rules are with regard to registration for the purposes of the GST, rules for payment, rules for returns, rules for refunds, and rules for invoices, debit and credit notes. Now from registration, payment of tax, distribution of tax, how that is to be done. Why I call them draft rules? Because these are rules which will be notified once the Act is passed. So in anticipation of the GST Act, all the legislations, these will be rules which are framed under those legislations. So once the Act is passed by the Parliament or by the state legislature, as the case may be, we want the draft rules to be ready in anticipation so that the rules can be notified immediately. Now these set of rules have been prepared by the technical experts, that's the officers assisting us. These 5 sets of rules were taken up for consideration, and all the 5 sets of rules have been approved. So we are in that sense in a state of readiness with subordinate legislation once the Act itself is approved. The second major item on the agenda today was the treatment of the existing tax incentives by the central and the state governments. Now the central government has given certain exemptions as far as those 11 states are concerned, Northeast and the Hill states. These are with regard to the levy of central excise. Similarly, when states incentivized industries to invest in their states, they have held out a series of incentives and exemptions, and some exemptions from certain taxation laws. Now, it's quite possible that some of the exemptions may get phased out, but for the exemptions which may remain, how will these exemptions fit into the GST system? So the meeting, the Council took up for discussion the management of these exemptions, and it was agreed that there would be a levy of tax under the GST system on all exempted entities. Once the tax is levied, the central government or the state government which gets that tax would then reimburse from the budget that quantum of tax back to the exempted entity. So it will be like so you will have the GST system in operation where everybody has to pay the tax, but if you are an exempted entity and the center or the state decides to continue that exempted entity, then they would be entitled to that amount being given back to them. Now the details of this in each case would be worked out, which exempted entities would remain, which would not remain would also be worked out by the central and the state governments. As far as the center is concerned, it's predominantly the northeast and the hill states. And as far as the states are concerned, these are specific industries. These could be also some individual generalized items that depends from every state to state. So the states will have to take a call as to which are the exempted entities, because they would then get the tax and then reimburse the tax back to those entities. So with these we have completed 4 items completely last time, 2 items completely today. 1 item, the 5th item last time we substantially discussed it, except that one issue which remains outstanding. And today there is that interpretation of the service tax division of authority between the center and the states. There is some discussion on this which is inconclusive. Now after this, with these 2 items remaining, of course the rates would be the big item to be discussed in the next meeting, and thereafter we will go to the draft of the 3 GST laws.
जो विवाद हुआ है वो रेस्टोरेंट को लेके,
देखिए वो एक इशू है, क्योंकि उस इशू के ऊपर पिछली बार चर्चा नहीं हुई थी, तो हमने ये सोचा है कि जिन एरियाज में सर्विसेज पे स्पेसिफिक टैक्सेस स्टेट से लगाए हुए थे, जो हमारे ऑफिसर्स हैं इस बीच में वो डिस्कस करके अपना फॉर्मुलेशन अगली मीटिंग के सामने रखेंगे. विवाद नहीं था, लेकिन ये अनडिसाइडेड इशू था जिसपे जो पिछली बार चर्चा में नहीं आया था, तो इसलिए स्वाभाविक है कि एक्सपर्ट्स उसको एग्जामिन कर लें और अगली मीटिंग में वो चर्चा में आ जाए. You see, the central government understanding is very clear that we had finalized this arrangement with regard to the existing service tax providers, and then officers in the state would be trained, new cases will be shared. What happens to these services which are taxed partly by the center, partly by the state, which the experts will examine that and then report in the next meeting, and then we will take a full decision with regard to that.
Minister Mr. Arun Jaitley there briefing the press after the meeting of the GST Council, and he says that still some issues that are inconclusive. One of them is the service tax dispensation, for which today's meeting took a lot of time. They discussed that, but that discussion remains inconclusive because it's the first time actually that it was taken up for discussion, and it has to be addressed to experts, and that is why it's inconclusive, not because of any disagreement on the subject. And he said that the draft GST rules have been approved. 5 sets of draft rules have been approved approved. And apart from that, he also said that he gave an explanation about those exempted entities under GST and how they would be compensated. In fact, all exempted entities, according to the finance minister, will be charged the GST, but that will be repaid back to them. The state governments or the central government, under whoever is receiving that tax, will have to repay it back to the exempted entities. The next meeting is on the 18th. Rates will be taken up at